Welcome and thank you for joining us for Supporting Communication Development. Our presenters today should know a little bit about this topic. We have Dr. Rosemary Kerrin, and she is the Director of Speech and Hearing with Jefferson Parish Schools. And also the coordinator of Speech and Hearing is Leigh Anne Vogy, and she is with us as well. I'll let them tell you more about themselves if they want, and get on with our content. Ladies, thanks so much for being here. You're muted still.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Always a challenge. It's our pleasure, though. And we'll just move on fairly quickly with this. We were able last month to do something on communication plans and how they work, which focused more on the children who had the more severe involvement. And I think once again, we're kind of looking at kids who potentially have more severe involvement in all of their skills and communication. But what we'll say, I think some of what we say applies to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So you can expand it on out. And that's our contact information. Sharon already told you who we were. So we'll go from there. We have a lot to give. And
she's already reviewed the meeting norms too.
So we're good. We have 3 purposes or objectives today. One of them is to talk a little bit about the Communication Bill of Rights, to demonstrate use of core vocabulary, if you're not familiar with that, and to highlight strategies to support communication skills in children. Do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So the Communication Bill of Rights is something that is not new to our theoretical thoughts, but it's newer, coming out from the National Joint Committee for Communication Needs of Persons with Severe Disabilities. We have this linked from our ASHA, which is the American Speech and Hearing Association's website. To our understanding, this is going to be hitting law pretty soon. So it just basically protects each person in their communication abilities and their opportunities to communicate with other people in whatever mode that they prefer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this should be a live link so that you'd be able to get this form as a download. If not, you should just say Communication Bill of Rights and you'd be able to get it on a Google search.
Yes, and this is for the lifespan of an individual.
So we want to move forward, and we're not moving forward. Come on. Oh, there we go. That's some of the background information. The basic idea is that communication is a basic human right. And among the topics that are there, it is that all people have the right to interact socially and build relationships, request desired objects, actions, events. If you think about people who are more severely involved with their communication, many times things are done to them or for them, and they are not active players in making decisions. They have the right to refuse. That's important. Right to be treated with dignity and addressed personally, mm-hmm. to be addressed directly, not to be spoken about or spoken for while they're present. And yet people tend to do it. What does he like to eat? Mm-hmm. Kind of thing, which is very insulting when you have someone who can express it for themselves, albeit not in talking. Think about the things that people do to infringe communication rights.
So when they're using the terms nonverbal, and we talked about this in our last presentation, we prefer using complex communicators
or non-talking.
Mm-hmm. And this is because words do exist in the brain. They've been exposed. They just may not be able to formulate them through their oral mechanisms. Mm-hmm. Speaking for or about the person in their presence. They're not providing access to communication strategies or devices. And this is, again, linked to the communication plan. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times the speech therapists are providing the communication strategies and opportunities through various means, where it could be picture symbols, devices, communication books, computerized systems. And sometimes those systems are put aside because either other children want to play with them or the user doesn't know how to use it. And so it goes into a closet.
Mm-hmm. And the last one there that we
Ugh.
put in as an infringement is trying to force communication. I really feel it's important, I mean, we both agree on this, that it's sometimes people don't want to talk. And that's as much a right to not talk as it is to have the right to talk. And I'm saying talk not in the speaking with your mouth for usage, but just, I don't want to have a conversation right now. I just want to have my own space. And even though we're the ones who are saying, oh, don't give him any more unless he asks for more, and we're doing all that, that's a therapeutic kind of thing. And then there are other times when it's like, I just don't want to have a conversation with you. And we need to respect that. Albeit we may take it as insulting because we're the best communicators of ever, right? Just briefly there, are there any questions that have popped up on that?
I don't have any questions in the chat box just yet, but I can't tell you how much I love that, the way you explained that, because my son is 25 and he does not speak. But he definitely communicates. We talked about that, I think, some when you were here before. But
Right.
I just love that, he has rights. And as he's gotten to be an adult, we try to protect those rights and protect his dignity, even with the workers who come in and, work with him. If he sets out he does not want to leave the house, then they need to leave because he's not going anywhere, and so we try to do that. It's just very important, but I didn't always think like that. And so I think I'm glad that you're pointing those things out, because it is something as parents we need to think about.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. And we do have this intermittently throughout this, so we can stop and have a little, let's clarify that spot. So we do have a few places for questions. Okay. Talking about language growth.
development. So when you're considering a neurotypically developing child, how do they learn language? Well, first of all, the parents are their first teachers. So let's think about in utero, all the development that happens there, all the pieces and parts are coming together. Hearing is starting to develop with the parts within the head as well as the ear on the outside. And then hearing sounds begins to happen. So the baby is hearing mom talk. It might sound a little muffled, but they're starting to hear the prosody and intonation patterns. There are often times where doctors are encouraging moms to read storybooks while they're pregnant, and it's because of language development. And then here comes the baby. The baby's born, and infants are spoken to and sung to and read to, and we're using different words and patterns of our voice. Sometimes they're very sing-songy, sometimes they're a little bit more firm, if we're talking to other people, or direct. So they're hearing the variations there. They're starting to establish joint attention. When we're holding that little baby and we're face to face with that baby and we're singing and talking to them, they're starting to look back at us and understand feelings and emotions and mom's facial expression. And we go back and forth, and baby coos and mom coos. So we're teaching from the time we're holding that baby.
And the thing about it really is that the brain is programmed at that point to listen and tune into language and start listening to the human voice. So from the very beginning, a neurotypical child is ready to learn language, and the experiences in the world, there's a whole lot of different ways that they learn, but you can see 6 different points there, all about learning, introducing new words, learning through play, learning categories, formal, informal, many, many things that children pick up without specific instruction. They just get it.
So we're taking them to the grocery store. Think about all the words they can learn at the grocery store or the zoo, or just playing with other peers at the park. There's so much that they're learning there.
Yeah. And then, of course, once they get to school, it becomes more formal, and they get more and more and more words. And once literacy starts, the words take off vocabulary wise, and different grammar, sentence structure. So you have one way to speak and another way to write, and different social situations. So they have to navigate dealing with adults in a formal setting, as well as dealing with peers and navigating friendships. And what happens if I want to play with what you're playing with. And so there's tons and tons and tons of experiences just in living life. And language is a big part of that. And language and life go hand in hand in this for the neurotypical child.
But then sometimes we have challenges.
These are the things that were picked up as to setting it up, but
Mhm.
what are the implications for these points on the development? Access to input, opportunities for the output. These are some of the things that could go wrong, that are challenges to the child getting his hearing in utero, being spoken to, sung to, whatever. Child with a sensory impairment.
It's not going to get the full impact of the language. Also visual impairment, you know, there's a lot to be learned also through the eyes. So children that are born with visual impairments or blindness have to learn through touch and tactile
And listening.
and listening. Then we're considering children with neurological differences, such as syndromes. You know, those children do have many, many delays.
A child who's born with Down syndrome has a different brain structure. A child who has cerebral palsy has a different brain structure, will not have the same kind of access to the whole world around him if he's motorically impaired. Then you also have autism, of course, which is very big. And these days, there are some children who we can tell from I'm saying there's something from birth that's just a little bit different than the parent will tell you, no, he didn't, there was something else there. And so these are all just neurological differences. So that child has a barrier to get access to the input and opportunities for output. A child with a disrupted home environment where they're dealing with issues of hunger or housing problems or violence in the home, safety. Those things are
Interrupters
big interrupters
to development.
because the child will be in a state of fear or distress and will not be receptive to learning. Prematurity is a risk factor, especially babies who spend all that time in NICU, where the senses are entirely different because they're not in utero when they should be. They're out in the world. They have to fight to stay warm. They have lights on. They have sounds around them. All of those things and tubes, everything that happens with them is affected. Some of our babies are exposed to drugs in utero. And then sometimes there are other things that happen and we can't even think of all of them. But any of these factors would have an implication for the child having access to language learning and language experiences. This is back to our typicals here.
So again, we're submerged in language from the very beginning if we're a neurotypically developing child. And so from ages 1.5 to 6, children can learn up to 13 words a day. And I can remember as a new mom counting every single word my child spoke or signed or something because I knew that he was learning. And then so speech therapists also monitor vocabulary sizes. So at 2 years, a child should have 500 words, and then you see it progresses 3 years, 1,000, 5 years, 3,000. And this is just from hearing vocabulary and being exposed through natural consequences in the environment.
And one of the things on that is that these are typically the number of words that you hear the child say. They will understand.
She wasn't away. She probably started
Sorry?
your shit.
Miss Desi. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But the understanding may be 10 times more
than what they're verbalizing.
So when your little 1-year-old is saying maybe 10 words, they would have an internal vocabulary of 50 words, which is pretty profound when you think about it. So, you know, that child at 2 who may be saying around 500 would understand potentially 5,000 words in context, be exposed, have that experience of It's pretty profound
It is.
when you think of that.
So this is not, and just to reiterate, this is not studying vocabulary that our children, typically do from kinder all the way through high school. This is just exposure.
So language is, profound there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. This is a really heavy duty statement here from the research. The typically developing child will have been exposed to language for approximately 4,380 waking hours by the time he starts talking at about 18 months old. Right? Typically developing kids, because you see that little child and they're interested and you're interested, and you start saying things to them and they're responding to you, even if it's just with a smile. So they're reinforcing you interacting with them. The child who has more challenges is non-typically developing. People tend not to communicate with them as much because you're not getting the feedback. You think he doesn't understand, he's not paying attention, it's not worth it. And this is where the next one is supposed to pop up. Come on.
Yep. So we start speech therapy and we use what we call augmentative or alternative communication strategies.
Okay, so starting speech therapy, that'll fix him, right?
Well, it takes a village. I'll say that. So when we start introducing symbols, which could be picture symbols, it could be objects that represent a meaning for a word, it takes lots and lots of exposure each week from all individuals for this child to really grasp that vocabulary word. So if you're looking here, if someone is using a symbol set and only has exposure to it 2 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes each,
Speech therapy.
it will take an alternate the alternate symbol user 84 years to acquire that same experience as a typically developing child.
I'm not going to be here in 84 years doing speech therapy.
I hope not. I hope I'm not either.
So everyone has
Everyone's
to pitch in. Everyone has to pitch in on
This
it.
is wild. Yes, it is wild.
Okay. And then there's screen time. Yeah.
Here's another challenge, and I'm sure you guys are seeing it just as much as we are. The effects of screen time on learning is tremendous. So on attention, let's just think about what the screen does. It pulls us in, right? It's attractive. It moves all the time. It's singing to us. So it's providing our brain constant stimulation. So when we are taking away the stimulation, it's hard for the child to attend to a book or a presentation.
Because the child has been taught that it will be the brain has been taught there's something new coming in a second, in a second, whereas the world doesn't move at that speed.
And it's okay to be bored, and our kids don't.
Yes, but if you think about what babies traditionally in pre-screen days were exposed to, there might be a mobile hanging that they would be looking at, and it would be moving at the speed of the air. So there might be a little movement, but they could stare at it. A typical infant or a child who's not typical could still stare at it for ages. They didn't have to have boom, 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 boom. With the screen time, the brain is taught, look for boom, 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 because if nothing happens, you don't want to look at it. Right. The world moves slowly, and that's how we build attention, is just by watching the world go slow. And
so this is where we see a lot of kids having difficulty with joint attention skills. So as we're providing therapy for 3 and 4-year-olds, they're bouncing from item to item to item to item to item, and we can't get them to just simply focus on stacking blocks for 5 minutes. So learning is going to be even more challenging if they really don't have the joint attention skills for a minute.
And similarly with engagement, and I think everyone here knows that experience of having the screen call to you away from the people that you're with. you're sitting there in a meeting, you're sitting there with friends, you're just, hanging out at the doctor's office. Everybody is on their phones now. Everybody wants to look at that. And you could even be, with somebody together and you hear a little bing and, you're going to go look at the screen. Well, it's even worse for the children because all of these activities or the apps or the games, they're designed. I mean, the people who build them say, yeah, we do it because we want you to spend more time on it. And so you only want to engage with the screen, which makes it hard to get joint attention with another person.
Conversational skills grow from joint attention.
And you can see how early they start and they're just like stare at the screen, stare at the screen. And what does this do also for sleep?
Oh,
Because you've
very
got the blue
disruptive.
light business, Okay, so on interaction there, because we just kind of talked about joint attention and engagement. The child wants to engage with the screen, but not people or the environment. And they end up not only having that tiny level, that business of attention jumping, but they also become passive because they expect it to be done to them or for them rather than having, I'm going to be an active player. So we had some pictures to pop up with this. Yes.
There we go.
So there you go. I mean, if you could see that little girl who's got the TV on, she's got wonderful toys next to her, and she's so engaged with the TV that she's just laying back with her feet up and the toys, forget them. She is not going to build something with those blocks next to her. She's going to watch that screen, that same little boy again. And oh, look at daddy.
Yeah, dad's the one that's being pulled away from the child because he's on his phone. And so, that also inhibits our children from learning more interactions and language when the adults are pulled away.
And what kind of relationship do you think you have based on that body language? Dad has his back to her and she's got her arms crossed. It's like,
we have some emotional.
Hey, I took my kid
messages.
fishing. Yeah, that's a bonding time. But she didn't seem to want to do anything. Hello? And then on behavior. Oh my word. All of these apps are delivering serotonin to the brain, which is something that is a pleasure chemical, and it gives it and it gives it and it gives it and it gives it. So your brain gets used to being bumped for pleasure and you want more and more and more. It's kind of addicting, but when you take it away,
oh boy,
the kids tantrum and the adults tantrum. So many of the behaviors that we are seeing with kids that tend to be lack of self-control, can't calm themselves, don't have any self-regulation, wild tantrums like you would expect maybe an 18-month-old, and this one is 4, and he's doing that off the charts kind of tantruming. Is it too much screen exposure? And he doesn't know how to calm himself down. He doesn't know how to be calm.
Possibly.
So those things are interfering with language learning big time also. This is a major problem and it's been identified in a lot of research. It's all coming back now. I remember when screens were being introduced, and people would go, oh, they're going to learn so much from it. Oh, it's such a wonderful tool. And it has now been shown in research that it does not help children to learn. The American Academy of Pediatrics, Canadian Pediatric, they say no screen time under 2 years of age. None. No screen time. Don't put them in front of the TV. Don't show them videos. Don't have them looking at the phone. Do 0 screen time. 2 to 5, limited screen time with a maximum of 1 hour a day. How many people use TV with 2 to 5-year-olds as their babysitter?
I would say I would be guilty.
Guilty as charged.
Yes.
Yeah. And once you have a mix of children, different ages in the household, it becomes even more dangerous, more difficult to control it. It is something though that is really important. Now, this came from the Hanen Institute, HANEN, which is a nonprofit dedicated to supporting children's development. It's based out of Canada, and they had a 1-2 page little thing on there. And what they said on top of all of this on screen time was there's one exception, and that is children who have a device that's needed to establish their communication, a child who is an AAC user. But it doesn't mean that you just hand them an iPad and say, here, communicate. The device needs to be dedicated with nothing accessible on it except the communication app. As soon as they learn to hit the home button or swipe out of it and get to an app that's a game, it has lost its value. It's so it, really strongly, if you're going to have iPads for a child for entertainment purposes, but you also need it for the communication, you need to have 2 iPads. Questions?
That was heavy.
Or comments?
I know several of you were posting that you felt the same about screen time.
I had a funny, just related to that very last thing you were talking about. When iPads first came out, we got one for my son, and we learned of these different apps that you could put on there, for communication and stuff. So we were working on that, and even him, good night, do you know he found the home button and the YouTube button at the speed of light? I was so shocked because he won't use things like just very simple communication devices. He just won't do it. We've done a lot of low tech things because the higher tech things weren't terribly successful, but I think he just feels like he communicates what his needs fine. So we tried to use it, and every time we'd get it out, he would hit that home button and YouTube before we could blink, and then he would laugh. That is pitiful. So it didn't last
We're
very
laughing
long.
because we have seen it.
Yeah.
A colleague of ours is doing a lot of help on the side to get children devices. And so what she is learning is that the children are more in tuned and receptive to computerized devices than our low tech devices or picture symbols because of the world we live in now. But like Rosemary said, you have to have a dedicated device that the only purpose is for communication versus, like my niece calls it, her videos.
Yeah, and locked out of everything else. I
Yes.
mean, that's where there have been so many advances. I remember, years ago, the high-tech devices were so complex, you needed a degree in computer
Yes.
engineering to be able to understand and they cost an arm and a leg. And it was a prohibitive amount of money to spend, and it was too confusing for everybody. So we're going to be kind of addressing things along those lines there. This is where we get to core vocabulary, because when we talk about vocabulary, we go back to, they know so many words. Oh, and look, there's just so many words that they have to learn. So what do we need to do? We've got to teach them all those words, right?
Whoa. So we have to think about what are the purposes of our communication for the children who have the challenges. Components of language include phonetics, that's the sound-based system, and phonology, putting those sounds together to make words, morphology, changing those words to have different meanings, so some grammar components, and syntax, putting words together to formulate sentences that are meaningful. Semantics, what are the meanings of those phrases and sentences? And then pragmatics would be the purpose, the meaning of how we communicate with each other. So for our complex communicators, we want to give them words, core vocabulary words that are most functional, that everyone can understand what they're trying to say, and they can formulate either using one word, or they can put 2 hits together and formulating 2-word utterances, 3, and then we expand from there. So what level do you think is the most important for our complex communicators?
For starting, to get started, when we're gonna get started, are we gonna start with the center and build out, or the outside and build in? And that's to get a response from y'all.
Out to in.
Out to in, yeah.
Absolutely, Sharon.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we're gonna be looking at, because the most important thing is having that communication. This was from last time slides, talking about when skills are limited. What does it mean? This is the children who will qualify for a communication plan. They have limited or no verbal skills. There's that word, meaning spoken, but Sir hasn't caught up with us. And then, as Leigh Anne said, we call them complex communicators. They're not going to be using speaking as their way. They can have various reasons as to why, but the strategies that they'll use will be gestural, vocal tones, patterns, behavioral, pictures, and objects. We're primarily looking at, I guess, using all of those, less of the behavioral ones. If behavioral means I'm going to throw it across the room or hit you or anything like that. We would like the behavioral ones to be more socially acceptable and less dangerous there. So the type of impairments they have would be
Receptive and expressive language impairments, which could include apraxia of speech, articulation impairments, stuttering, fluency impairments, or pragmatic and auditory processing impairments. So we need to consider, what does the child need to be understood, and how can they express their basic wants and needs in a functional manner? So here come core vocabulary words. These are high frequency words that help support functional communication in order to make their wants, needs, feelings, and ideas known. So we're looking at pronouns like I and me, you, me and my, mine. Verbs, want, go, eat, stop, help. And functions, yes, no, more, all done, turn. And so these are some of those first words that we're going to focus on to help the child.
And this is a little bit different from what we would traditionally have done and
In the
what you
past,
would
yep.
see too from children who are coming out with their very first words. A lot of times it is naming something. It's saying, naming a person,
Ball.
mommy, balls, name your favorite thing. And so we tend to focus on nouns. Truth of the matter is, you can't do a whole lot with nouns. Nouns are just naming the thing. Ball,
What are we going to do with it?
you know, but if I say my ball, I want ball,
Throw
stop
ball.
you know, with any of these, help, ball, help, give. So we're asking for help with it, or my turn, all done, my turn, ball. It gives us some things that we can build a real communication experience there. So core vocabulary actually kind of came out of texting, because when you stop and look at what people are using to text, you're actually mostly using core vocabulary. You're not writing long essays in a text. You typically are, where you at? What's up? At home, coming now, those types of things. So it's very core short things. So if you look at your text, you'll find the kind of core vocabulary that you use. So why is it important for these kids? Hey, it gives them things they can do.
Yeah.
Look at the uses.
These are, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead,
These
take
are
it.
these are very important skills that the children need to be able to use to advocate for themselves. So requesting, whether they want us to perform an action or whether they want something from us, to reject something rather than pushing it out the way or turning their back or tantruming on the floor. We can give them other words such as, no, stop, I don't want that. The ability to ask or answer questions. You want more? And then they can respond yes or no. Or they can ask us, do you want more?
So this little thing here is directly related to the words that were put here. So we don't have to have a lot of words because that was one of the challenges with the real complex communication things. You got so many words. Where do you find them? Where are they? I can't find it. But this is very simple. You can say, I want to eat. I want eat. You don't need to. Okay.
No, we don't need the grammatical components.
Okay. It's my turn, my turn, my turn. We don't need, we're having something going on personally between us, and we are expressing real needs and feelings.
And the
there
communication partner clearly understands what
is going on.
is going on.
Mhm. So we have multiple examples here of different kinds of core boards. This is one that is our most basic that we've got here in Jefferson Parish. And it's got, what's that, 15 words on it, 15 pictures. It's built off Boardmaker pictures. It's simple. And I think this is a good place to start. Not because the kids can't deal with more, but because the adults can't. When you get to something like this, which is an adapted core that comes from symbol sticks, and you can't see all of it.
Right.
Quite honestly, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 3 by 6, 36. And I have one that I carry on my lanyard, and it's like this size. And I spend a lot of time going, wait,
Trying to find it.
where is that? Where is one? Because I don't have it in my head to know where it is.
Right.
And the core boards can be even more complex. This particular one came to us from some people in Texas who designed it. And it's brilliant because what you have is the basic part there of the board with those symbols. So you get to know them. And then at the top, you see how it's ring bound. You can flip it up according to, do you want colors? Do you want feelings? Do you want different vocabulary, thinking words, things like that? So you can flip up and get other vocabulary. And at the bottom, it's got Velcro, which allows you to put what's called fringe vocabulary. So if we're doing a science class and we need words like test or experiment or mass, we can put it along there.
Yep.
So it's brilliant for what it is. But quite honestly, when I'm going to start personally, I'm going to start with the one at the beginning, because that's it. Oh, and then this is LAMP. This is a picture of the LAMP homepage, which is a widely used program that goes on the computer, on the iPad, sorry. It's an iPad app from Saltillo, PRC. But all of these are core boards to start with. Learn your basic words, and then we can expand beyond that.
And they use a color coding system with a lot of these core boards because it categorizes words by like types and functions. So you could see some of the yellow words are personal. So some pronoun usage, and then some of the verbs are in pink on that, the one that flips, and on the small board,
or in green or
blue. So it's for programming. It's visual programming, and then you can also do it by motor planning.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's
soon there. So
difference between core boards and more traditional vocabulary. So traditional, of course, we're talking about nouns, and we talked about we can label all day long, but we're not, as a communication partner of the child or the adult, we don't know what they want with the noun.
I'm just thinking, but think about how you think about vocabulary teaching. What's that? What's that? Name the picture, name the picture. What color is it? How many? Count them up. And you're looking at building vocabulary with that, but how useful is it in the big picture?
Adjectives are very common in academics. So the little ones will start with the color words and how many. And then we're moving on with verbs. What is he doing? I think of this in more traditional language therapy than with therapy with our complex communicators.
But if we're talking about supporting language development in children, this is where you're looking at 4, 5, 6-year-old equivalents rather than the child who's emerging with his language. And what does he need? He needs function.
He needs up, drink, eat,
want
more,
no
want. Stop.
My turn. All of those words can be used in many different contexts. So the core words can describe what's happening now and be relevant to real life. So the child may not be saying them with his mouth, but he can be pointing to them and communicating his thoughts, his feelings, his actions, his needs with that. Questions on core vocabulary.
Don't have any in the chat right now.
Okay.
Then we'll keep going.
Okay, we'll keep going. We have found it to be a very powerful concept, but it does take the thinking, the traditional thinking, and put it on its head. So I'm sure the same thing applies to y'all, because you're hearing it like, oh, huh? Or maybe you all know it already and you're wasting time.
Okay, so who's involved with developing the communication skills? Well, we will continually say the village. It takes the parents as their first teachers, as well as a team member later when they start enrolling in school. And then other caregivers. So we spend a lot of time with 3 and 4-year-olds. Sometimes they're in the daycare setting. And so those caregivers are part of our team. Siblings, cousins, they're communication partners as well. Community parties, the ladies in the grocery store, the ladies at church, the men at church. We're all communicating with this child. And then, of course, service providers like teachers, speech, OT, PT, paraeducators, etc.
So notice in priority level that the professional service providers are the last, because we spend the least amount of time with the child, generally speaking. The child is living outside. His real life is outside of what we're doing. We're there to support and to help him get some skills, but the way he develops the skills is by using them with all of these other important people. You know, we come and go in the child's life, but family members, siblings, cousins, the community,
Mainstay
should be there, you know, and we got to help those babies when they don't have that kind of security. But that would be the best thing. So where are we going to start? Where are we going to start with this, right? What are we going to do? Oh, okay.
So of course, in the home, we're talking about all the things that are around you and what do we do with them? We're taking the children everywhere and we're talking about it as we're driving. We're going to the zoo. What do you think we're going to see at the zoo? And then while we're there, we're describing everything that we're seeing at the zoo. When we come home, if they're not sleeping, tell grandma what you saw at the zoo today. So we're constantly focusing on language. And encouraging communication in all environments and with all members of the family or community.
Okay, and exactly how you're going to do it. Start with eye contact, engagement, joint attention, follow the child's lead, the child's interest, see what he's interested in. Eye contact doesn't have to be look at me sort of thing, but it's getting that connection in there. Now, you know, eye contact one-to-one. Oh, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. Yeah, right. Joint attention is being able to look at a picture, look at a toy, look at something together where we're both looking at the same thing. And that's another step in our development, because we're then getting something that we can share and talk about. It might be following the child's interest and not our own.
Right.
Talk about everything. You notice that we are not talking about show it to him on the iPad. We're talking about
real life.
Real life. You were saying your mom was told go to
yes. So my brother, of course, is 37, 38 and has Down syndrome. So one of the first recommendations to her from the speech therapist when he was 3 was take him to the grocery store and talk about everything in the grocery store. You know, when you pick up an apple, name it, but what do we do with the apple? How many do we want to put in the bag? Same thing with the orange. Well, and then you can compare the orange and the apple. So everything is.
So to this day, she still says, that's the advice I was given and how important it was. Now the next one is use motherese, and motherese is not only the mother uses it, all people can use it. But it's been identified as a style of talking to children, to young children. When you're actually speaking with a child who's learning language in that first few years, and this is typical development, you adjust what you're saying.
Yes.
You adjust it to what does he understand? You'll slow it down. You give him time to look, think about what you said, processing time. You're going to use different tones of voice. Oh, that's exciting. Oh, what do you think? I don't like that. So you use all of this exaggerated thing, but you make it in small
Smaller.
steps that the child would understand. I'm not saying that you have a 15-year-old and you're going to talk to them like they're a baby at all. But you need to give them processing time, and you need to gear things for what's appropriate for them from what you know about them. So it's not bombard them with everything, but it's also don't simplify it so much that they're insulted.
Right.
It's, if you're in tune with people, you get that sense of what you should be doing for them and with them. And then modeling for other people. Encourage other people to communicate with the
Yes.
child. This is not a one-person show.
And
Yeah.
I actually did this today
Mhm.
on the playground for some other teachers. We had some pre-K students out, and the speech therapist and I at this particular school decided our lesson of the day, we were going to play with the kids.
Mhm.
So we were modeling different things that we could play with the children to keep them occupied, but also to engage language and develop it and grow it. So I was hoping that the paras were paying attention to what we were doing while we were modeling with the children.
And always reading is very important. Reading is an option for looking at iPads, because the pictures don't change, they don't jump, they don't, and you have to focus on things. And reading doesn't mean you have to use the words in the book. A lot of times it's a
Adjust it.
question of just looking at the pictures and seeing what's going on in the pictures.
Yep.
That can really expand a lot of vocabulary. So this is
How
how
to
you're going to
use
use
the
it.
core board. So we need to have these accessible in many, many areas throughout the home, the daycare, or the school setting. And this is, we feel like this is a really good backup for when a child doesn't have their talker, maybe, or the talker needs to be repaired or has new batteries.
Mhm.
Well, we need to have other options in place for the child. Or we don't want to take the talker to the cafeteria table because maybe a drink will spill on it. So we're
Mhm.
protecting it, but we're going to take some other uses out there, uses with this.
And like I said, as an adult getting started, I might want something simpler so I can say, this is how we do it. So
Yes.
what are we going to do with this thing? Step one.
Model the use of saying the words and pointing to the word.
Step two, model the use, say the word, point to the image.
Step 3, model the use, say the word, and point to the image.
Step 4, model the use, say the word, point to the image, and so on. All the adult is doing here is developing joint attention. The children are kind of engaged to look at the pictures, but these words don't mean anything to them just because they see them. They don't have this magic decoding system that go, oh, I can read board maker, or I can read symbol sticks. I can read that already. No, they have to learn it. They have to be taught it. So the adult does too. We're teaching them that, and we're not demanding a response at this point, but we're giving the model, and that shows them how to use it and teaches the child this is a valid way to communicate.
And we know that many of our complex communicators learn and think through pictures. So this attaches the meaning to the word for them.
Mhm. Okay, so you remember this here, all right? How many
Waking
hours
hours.
before he's 18 months old? And this, okay, 84 years, right? So this is what we hit on, coming back to this. This is why they go, oh no, speech can do that. This won't work. These are barriers that we encounter with adults, not with children.
So not knowing where the icons are. We're learning too.
Yeah.
So both parties are learning, where are we supposed to point? Where can I find that symbol for that word?
Mhm.
And it's okay to stumble through it. Rosemary and I do.
A lot. Motor planning is something that's real important, because once you do learn where things are, it becomes quicker. And so you just have to do the trial and error to find it, the seek, hunt, look for. Think about learning to type. Was a
Yes.
lot of motor planning.
Yep.
You had to learn where the letters were and learn, teach those different fingers how to do it. Even those of you who were one finger typists, you had to learn where the letters were, because it's not obvious.
And it's not natural. It's like learning another language as an adult. It's not natural for us. It takes us a longer time to know what certain meanings of words are. But same thing with motor, where this is not natural. I'm not a pointer for communicating, but now I need to be, because I'm with this child.
Yeah. Talking is the easiest way for us to communicate. We just take for granted and do it, but that's not what we
Yeah.
want to do there.
Many of our children want to play with the communication boards that we supply.
Create, yes.
It's fine for them to want to play with them at first, but then we need to know that this does have a purpose, and it's not just one of the little girls that I see wants to color on the back of it because she likes to color. But then we turn it over and we go back to modeling.
This is what it's for, yeah. But it's all exploration.
Yep.
The child is going to reject it.
Absolutely. It's hard. They're learning something new. It's easier to just drag mom by the arm and point and get what I want.
And I emphasize this piece about learned helplessness in this. To me, that is one of our biggest challenges that we need to fight against, because children who are typically developing get a bit of independence in them, and they will do what they're going to do. You cannot stop them from walking. They are going to walk. I do it. And that's it. But a child who has challenges with it gets used to adults doing it for them. And they really go, and it's, oh, baby, let me help you with that. And sometimes, no, we got to challenge them, because
they can rise up and meet some challenges.
They can meet some challenges. The number of kids that we have encountered, I think, who you get this sense of, oh, you've got it inside and you could do a whole lot more, but it's easier for you to just let somebody take you there, or carry you, or
oh yes,
or give it to you. That is something that needs to be fought against. And of course you feel, oh, I love my baby, I want to take care of him. But another part of taking care of him is getting him to do stuff on his own.
Some independence.
Yeah, learning independence.
And the last one is, this is a real hard one for us, is to get other adults to buy into the system. Many adults think that AAC is a replacement and will hinder natural speech development. And research is telling us that no, this is an aid. This is augmentative, which means to enhance their methods of learning communication.
And many, many children who start with AAC strategies will begin speaking at a certain age. They will begin talking because the vocabulary is there, and they've had access to it, and they've had the exposure to it, and they're going to give it a try. And if you try to talk and nobody understands you, you tend to give up. But if you can point and try to talk, you're going to be rewarded, because people will understand you. And so that will be another way to get the message across and encourage the child to do more of that. With people having the goal that they want their kids to talk. Sometimes that's realistic and sometimes it isn't, but we need to support the children anyway. So where are you going to implement it? At school, right? And this was very hard because it bleeds into the background. It was worse in Black. But they need information about the curriculum, the environment, expectations. The child will spend about 30 35 hours a week at school. So the schools need to participate in implementing this. And at home, that's the most important environment for the child.
Yep.
It needs to be integrated in their strategies at home. Family needs an open mind and cooperation. And you need to have expectations, empower the child, and not enable. And that's going back to that learned helplessness. So it is a real team thing. It goes everywhere.
So the buy-in, so we're going to use facts with our team members. And so when we model words for the user, they need to see them many, many, many times before they start using them themselves, like 50 to 150 times.
So that's where we say model, 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 model. You don't do it 5 times and say, oh, he didn't learn it, it doesn't work. 50 to 150.
Right. How long do we immerse a typically developing child in language before we expect to hear a word? A year.
So
Or
same
more.
thing again. You've got that, how many, so many 1,000 hours. Give it to them there. This is what's called evidence-based practice. It is a highly recommended strategy to use because all the evidence supports it, and celebrate the successes that you get. We're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
We got to hurry up. Do's and don'ts. Focus on key words when you're modeling. Don't think you have to be grammatically correct. It's okay to say, me eat, it gone, whatever.
Again, the dedicated device is not a toy. It doesn't have videos. It's not a game. Not called a tablet or an iPad. It can be called a talker. And it's not for academic quizzing.
It's their voice out all the time. And many times we have it tucked away in a closet because people say, I didn't want him to break it. It doesn't matter. You break it, we'll get another one.
Yep.
Really, model. Presume competence. Presume that the child will understand what you're doing. Focus on the key words of what you're saying. Don't worry about grammar.
Yep.
Don't model nouns. Use all those other words.
Give them wait time through pausing.
All daily activities.
So when you're modeling, you're not necessarily expecting something in return from them. So modeling is not requiring, just encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so these are some quickies on, okay, the behavior was, oh, you pushed the book closed. I think you want to stop reading. You can tell me, I want to stop. And show him the symbol, stop, point to that. This is what we do, stop. Point to the stop sign, we've stopped. Scenario 2, label the behavior. I see you reaching. Oh, you want a turn.
You want turn. And we're modeling as we touch each symbol.
Okay, we're getting to the summary. We're on time. There.
Awesome. So in summary, communication starts when the babies are in utero, and language develops with exposure and engagement. Parents are the child's first teachers of communication and language skills. Speech language therapy is recommended when there are delays and impairments identified. However, speech therapy is not the be all end all. Remember, it takes the village. So parents, caregivers, teachers, peers, community members are all communicative models and partners. And then you learned about core vocabulary words and their use for functional communication purposes. And so we encourage all types of communication, verbalizations, vocalizations, eye gaze, pointing, hand leading, use of symbols, devices, anything to make their wants, needs, and feelings known in a functional manner.
Any other questions or comments to finish up?
I don't have any in the chat. I did put the link for our little survey in the chat box. So if y'all don't mind, grab that real quick before we finish up and just do those few little questions for us. And that gives us some feedback on ways that we can improve or, other things that you may be interested in learning. Ladies, it's most informative. This is kind of my wheelhouse, so I love listening to the ideas and things.
Yeah.
One thing that we did with my son, I can't say it was totally successful. He was very compartmentalized. So if we tried to use the board maker symbols at home, he would have none of that. But we found these card protectors. They're for baseball card collectors, I think.
Yeah.
And they're really, really sturdy because he would just tear everything up. But these things that were hard to break, they're very, very thick
Yeah.
plastic, and you could just slide the symbol into that. And so we put Velcro on the back, and we put a strip of Velcro down his door frame. And we would just have those there so that we could use them, and they were handy. So that may be an idea, you know, for somebody who has a little destructo in the house. He was not successful in tearing those up, but that was, you know, an idea that we used instead of just paper or even just laminated, because they just get torn up.
Yeah. Yeah, lamination, we have found different weights of laminating plastic. So the typical one, yeah, doesn't last at
No.
all. But I've been using 5 mil, and we do have some 7 mil for those that are real destructos. You cannot get into a 7 mil when that's been sealed up. Yeah, that's, you know, very
Yep.
solid. So yeah, I agree. I agree. There. So thank you all. We wish you have a wonderful summer. And thank you, Sharon, for asking us to do this. We've really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. I may call on you again next school year sometime and see if we can't have you back on.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sharon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.